Abby had just put her son to bed when her phone rang. It was an unfamiliar number, but something told her to pick it up. "Hello," she answered, her voice cautious. There was a pause on the other end, long enough to make her wonder if it was a wrong number. "Abby, it's Maggie," came the voice, slightly slurred. Abby's stomach dropped. Her sister Maggie rarely called, and when she did, it was never good news. "Maggie, are you okay?" Abby asked, though she already knew the answer. Maggie was never okay. Her life was a series of bad decisions, each one more reckless than the last. "I need your help," Maggie said, her voice wavering. I did something stupid." Abby closed her eyes, feeling the weight of her sister's words. It was always something with Maggie. Ever since they were kids, Abby had been cleaning up her sister's messes. It was like she was born to fix things, even when they were beyond repair. "What happened?" Abby asked, bracing herself for the worst. I borrowed some money," Maggie confessed, her voice barely a whisper. "From some people I shouldn't have, and now they want it back, with interest." Abby felt a surge of anger mixed with a familiar pang of worry. "How much do you owe, Maggie?" $20,000, Maggie admitted, her voice breaking. "I thought I could pay it back, but things got out of hand." Abby nearly dropped the phone. $20,000 was more money than she and her husband had saved up. It was money they didn't have. "Maggie, how could you be so reckless?" Abby's voice rose with frustration. I know, Maggie sobbed. "But please, Abby, you have to help me. I don't know what they'll do if I don't pay them back." Abby bit her lip, her mind racing. She couldn't just leave her sister to deal with this alone, but how could she possibly come up with that kind of money? "I'll figure something out," Abby said finally, though she had no idea what that would be. "But you have to promise me, Maggie, no more secrets. You need to tell me everything." "I promise," Maggie said, but Abby could already hear the hesitation in her voice. There were always more secrets, more lies. Abby just hoped this time she could find a way to help before it was too late. The next morning, Abby couldn't shake the unease that had settled over her. She knew she had to talk to her husband, Tom, about Maggie's situation, but she dreaded the conversation. Tom was patient and kind, but he had his limits, especially when it came to Maggie. Over breakfast, Abby decided to break the news. "Tom, I need to talk to you about something," she began, her voice tense. Tom looked up from his coffee, concern already etched on his face. "What is it?" "It's Maggie," Abby said, glancing down at her hands. She got herself into some trouble. She borrowed money from some dangerous people, and now they want it back." Tom's expression hardened. "How much?" $20,000, Abby admitted, feeling a lump in her throat. Tom set his cup down, the clink of the porcelain echoing in the silent kitchen. "Abby, we don't have that kind of money. What was she thinking?" "She wasn't," Abby said, her voice shaking. "She never does. But we can't just leave her to deal with this on her own. We have to help her." Tom ran a hand through his hair, sighing deeply. "Abby, I know she's your sister, but we have to think about our family, too. We can't risk everything for her." "I know," Abby whispered, tears pricking at her eyes. "But she's my sister. I can't just abandon her." Tom reached across the table, taking her hand in his. "We'll figure something out," he said softly. "But Maggie needs to understand that this is the last time. We can't keep bailing her out." Abby nodded, grateful for Tom's support, but the weight of Maggie's situation still pressed heavily on her chest. She knew they would find a way to help, but at what cost? And what if this wasn't the last time Maggie needed saving? A few days later, Abby arranged to meet Maggie at a quiet cafe on the outskirts of town. It was a place they used to go as teenagers, back when life was simpler and their problems were nothing more than school gossip and weekend plans. But those days felt like a lifetime ago. When Abby arrived, she found Maggie already there, sitting in a corner booth with her head down. She looked pale and tired, her usual confidence replaced by a nervous energy that made her hands shake. "Maggie," Abby said as she slid into the booth across from her, "you look awful." "Thanks," Maggie replied with a weak smile. "I feel awful." Abby sighed, feeling a mix of frustration and sympathy. "Tell me everything," she said. "I need to know exactly what's going on." Maggie hesitated, her eyes darting around the cafe as if she was afraid someone might overhear. "It started a few months ago," she began, her voice low. "I met this guy, Jason. He was charming, you know? Said all the right things. We started dating and he introduced me to his friends. They seemed nice at first, but then they started talking about money. Investments, they called it." Abby frowned, her instincts telling her this was going to be bad. "And you invested with them?" Maggie nodded, her face flushed with shame. "Jason said it was a sure thing. I put in what little savings I had, but it wasn't enough. So I borrowed more, thinking I'd pay it back once the investment paid off." "But it didn't," Abby guessed, her heart sinking. "No," Maggie admitted. "It was all a scam. Jason disappeared, and now his so-called friends are demanding their money back. I tried to talk to the police, but they said there wasn't enough evidence to go after them. And now these guys are threatening me. They said if I don't pay up, they'll come after me." Abby felt a cold fear settle in her stomach. This was worse than she had imagined. "Why didn't you come to me sooner, Maggie?" Maggie looked down at her hands, tears welling up in her eyes. "I was scared. I thought I could handle it on my own. But I can't, Abby. I'm in over my head." Abby reached across the table, taking Maggie's trembling hands in hers. "We're going to get through this," she promised. "But you need to be honest with me, Maggie. No more secrets." Maggie nodded, wiping away her tears. "I promise," she said. But Abby couldn't help but wonder if there were still things Maggie wasn't telling her. Over the next few days, Abby and Tom worked tirelessly to come up with a plan. They combed through their finances, looking for any way to scrape together the money Maggie needed. It wasn't easy. They had savings, but it was meant for emergencies, real emergencies, like medical bills or repairs to the house. Tom suggested they take out a loan, but Abby was hesitant. They were already stretched thin, and adding more debt would only make things worse. But as the days passed and the pressure mounted, it became clear they had no other choice. "I'll go to the bank tomorrow," Tom said one evening as they sat together in the living room, their son asleep in the next room. "We'll get the loan, pay off these guys, and then Maggie will have to figure out the rest on her own." Abby nodded, though the thought of taking on more debt made her stomach churn. What if it doesn't work? What if they come back for more? "We'll deal with that if it happens," Tom replied, though he didn't sound convinced. "But Abby, we can't keep doing this. Maggie needs to learn that there are consequences for her actions." "I know," Abby said softly. "But she's my sister. I can't just leave her to deal with this alone." Tom sighed, pulling her close. "We'll get through this, Abby. But you need to talk to Maggie. Make her understand that this is the last time." The next morning, Abby met Maggie at the bank. The loan process was grueling, and by the end of it, Abby felt like the walls were closing in on her. But they got the money, and after a tense meeting with Maggie's creditors, the debt was paid off. For a moment, Abby felt a sense of relief. The immediate danger was gone, and Maggie was safe. But as they left the meeting, Maggie turned to Abby, her face pale. "Thank you," she said, her voice trembling. "I don't know what I would have done without you." Abby forced a smile, but inside she felt hollow. "Just promise me, Maggie. No more secrets, no more lies. I can't keep doing this." Maggie nodded, but Abby could see the fear in her eyes. She knew her sister well enough to know that this wasn't the end of the story. There were still secrets buried deep, and Abby feared what might happen when they finally came to light. A few weeks passed, and life slowly began to return to normal. Abby tried to focus on her family, on her son and the baby she and Tom were planning for, but no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Then, one day, she received a call from an unknown number. Her heart pounded as she answered, expecting more bad news, but it wasn't Maggie on the other end. It was a woman. "Is this Abby?" the woman asked, her voice cold and distant. "Yes, this is Abby. Who's calling?" Abby replied, her anxiety growing. "My name is Sarah," the woman said, her tone sharp. "I'm Jason's wife." Abby felt the blood drain from her face. "Jason's wife?" "Yes," Sarah confirmed. "I know about you, Abby. I know what you and Maggie have been doing with my husband." Abby was speechless. This was a nightmare. "I don't know what you're talking about," she stammered. But Sarah cut her off. "Don't play dumb," Sarah snapped. "I've seen the messages, the emails, I know everything. And now, thanks to your sister, my life is ruined." "Sarah, please, I had no idea," Abby pleaded. But Sarah wasn't listening. "You think you can just waltz in and take what you want, ruin people's lives, and walk away without consequences?" Sarah's voice was filled with venom. "Well, think again. I'm going to make sure you and Maggie pay for what you've done." The line went dead, leaving Abby in stunned silence. She could barely process what had just happened. Jason had been married this whole time, and Maggie had known. Worse, Maggie had dragged Abby into this mess without telling her the whole truth. Abby felt sick to her stomach. She had risked everything for her sister, and now it was all falling apart. She knew she had to confront Maggie, but she wasn't sure she could handle what she might uncover. Abby didn't wait. She drove straight to Maggie's apartment, her mind racing with anger and betrayal. When Maggie opened the door, she looked surprised to see Abby standing there, her face pale and her eyes filled with tears. "Abby, what's wrong?" Maggie asked, but Abby couldn't hold back her fury. "You lied to me, Maggie!" Abby shouted, pushing past her sister and into the apartment. "You lied about everything. Jason was married, and you knew it." Maggie's face crumpled with guilt. "Abby, please, I can explain." "Explain what?" Abby demanded, her voice trembling. "That you dragged me into your mess without telling me the truth? That you let me risk everything for you, knowing full well what you were involved in?" Maggie burst into tears, collapsing onto the couch. "I'm sorry, Abby," she sobbed. "I didn't mean for it to get this bad. I thought I could fix it, but everything just spiraled out of control." Abby stood there, her anger warring with the deep love she still felt for her sister. "Why didn't you tell me, Maggie? Why did you keep this from me?" "I was scared," Maggie admitted, her voice barely audible. "I was afraid you'd hate me, that you'd abandon me if you knew the truth." Abby closed her eyes, taking a deep breath to steady herself. "Maggie, I would have helped you no matter what, but you can't keep lying to me, not about something like this." Maggie nodded, wiping her tears with trembling hands. "I know, Abby. I know I've messed up, but I don't know how to fix it." Abby sat down beside her sister, her heart heavy. "We have to go to the police," she said firmly. "We need to report everything, including Jason. It's the only way to get out of this." Maggie looked up at her, fear in her eyes. "But what if they arrest me? What if I go to jail?" "We'll get you a lawyer," Abby promised. "But you have to face the consequences, Maggie. You can't keep running from this." Maggie nodded, though she looked terrified. "Okay," she whispered. "I'll do it. I'll go to the police." Abby reached out, pulling her sister into a hug. "We'll get through this together," she said, though her voice wavered with uncertainty. "But you have to be honest from now on, Maggie. No more secrets." Maggie nodded against her shoulder, but Abby couldn't shake the feeling that there were still more lies waiting to be uncovered. The next day, Abby and Maggie went to the police station. Maggie confessed everything, from her involvement with Jason to the money she had borrowed. The officers took her statement seriously, and while they couldn't promise leniency, they assured her that coming forward was the right thing to do. As they left the station, Maggie looked exhausted but relieved. "Thank you, Abby," she said, her voice hoarse. "I don't know what I would have done without you." Abby smiled weakly, though her mind was still racing. The nightmare was far from over, but at least they were finally on the right path. "We'll figure it out, Maggie," she said, trying to sound reassuring. "But we have to be strong." Maggie nodded, but Abby could see the fear in her eyes. They both knew that the road ahead was going to be difficult, but they had no choice but to face it together. As they walked to the car, Abby's phone rang. She glanced at the screen and felt a jolt of anxiety when she saw it was Sarah calling again. She hesitated, then answered. "Abby, we need to talk," Sarah said, her voice sharp. "I'm willing to cut a deal, but only if you and Maggie cooperate fully." "What kind of deal?" Abby asked, her heart pounding. "You tell the police everything you know about Jason and his associates, and I'll make sure they go after him instead of Maggie," Sarah explained. "But if you keep anything from me, the deal's off." Abby swallowed hard. She knew this was their best chance to protect Maggie, but it meant trusting Sarah, a woman who had every reason to hate them. "Okay," Abby agreed, her voice trembling. "We'll cooperate." "Good," Sarah said, her tone cold. "I'll be in touch." The call ended, and Abby turned to Maggie, who was staring at her with wide eyes. "What did she say?" Maggie asked, her voice shaking. "She's offering us a deal," Abby explained, though she could barely believe it herself. "But we have to tell the police everything we know about Jason." Maggie nodded, though her expression was filled with dread. "I can't believe this is happening," she whispered. "Neither can I," Abby admitted. "But we're in this together. Maggie, we'll get through it." As they drove home, Abby couldn't shake the feeling that their lives would never be the same. The weight of the secrets they had kept, the lies they had told. It all seemed too much to bear. But for the first time in a long time, Abby felt a glimmer of hope. They had taken the first step towards making things right, and no matter what happened next, they would face it together. Months passed, and the legal proceedings against Jason and his associates dragged on. Maggie's cooperation with the authorities earned her some leniency, but the experience left her deeply scarred. She decided to leave town, hoping to start fresh in a place where no one knew her past. Abby and Tom supported her decision, though it was hard to say goodbye. They knew it was for the best, and they promised to visit often. As they watched Maggie drive away, Abby felt a mix of sadness and relief. The storm had passed, but the damage it left behind would take time to heal. Back home, Abby focused on her family. The ordeal had brought her and Tom closer together, and they decided to put the past behind them and move forward. They welcomed their second child, a beautiful baby girl, and Abby felt a sense of peace she hadn't known in years. One evening, as Abby sat on the porch watching her children play in the yard, she felt a sense of contentment wash over her. The road had been long and difficult, but they had made it through. Maggie was rebuilding her life, and Abby knew she would find her way. Abby smiled as her son ran up to her, his face flushed with excitement. "Mommy, look what I found," he exclaimed, holding up a small shiny rock. "That's a beautiful rock," Abby said, ruffling his hair. "You should keep it safe." "I will," he promised, running off to show his sister. As Abby watched her children play, she felt a sense of hope for the future. The secrets and lies were behind them, and they had come out stronger on the other side. No matter what challenges lay ahead, Abby knew they could face them together. And for the first time in a long time, she felt ready to embrace whatever came next.